GGG made some big changes to Tier 17 maps in the past week that have massively increased the amount of currency and Scarabs that they drop. This has led to a surge in the number of players farming Tier 17 maps. There's a gold rush. And how do you get rich in a gold rush? You sell shovels. Hi, it's Laryl, and I'm going to talk about how to farm up a lot of Tier 17 maps efficiently. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, so I've been farming up a lot of Tier 17 maps and also running a lot of Tier 17 maps recently, and they're pretty tough and pretty rewarding. It's crazy how much stuff they can drop. I think one of the smartest decisions that GGG made when designing these maps was making them incapable of self-sustaining. You can't get a Tier 17 map when you're running a Tier 17 map. You have to farm Tier 16 maps to get more or buy them from other players. This creates a really valuable market inefficiency for people who are willing to just farm Tier 16 maps in search of more maps, because Tier 17 maps are valuable, but Tier 16 maps are also valuable because they can generate Tier 17 maps. Alright, so now let's just talk a little bit about Tier 17 maps, and I have the Tier 17 map page from the PoE wiki pulled up here. And we'll just talk about how they drop. It's pretty basic. When you get a Tier 16 map drop, you have a chance, if you have all 4 void stones socketed at 6.4%, to just convert that map into a Tier 17 map. And then there is some sort of diminishing return after that. We don't exactly know what it is. I would guess it's about 50% or maybe even like 75% reduced. But I have gotten multiple Tier 17 map drops in a single map before. It happens, but it's not super common. Now, there is a bit of a disparity in the pricing on Tier 17 maps if we look at the PoE Ninja page, and that's because there are some very different drops that occur within those Tier 17 maps. So let's kind of talk about like how you get specific ones. So specific maps will drop, specific Tier 17 maps will drop from specific Tier 16 maps. So for example, if you wanted to farm Ziggurat, since it is, I guess at the moment, the most valuable of the Tier 17 maps, you couldn't farm like Cemetery and get Ziggurat. You would get Sanctuary instead. If you farmed Dunes, Dunes will give you Fortress. Well, people like farming Dunes, and as a result, Fortress is kind of devalued. So you would need to farm whatever is the best map in this Ziggurat column, and I think that's probably Toxic Sewer. So there's a bit of room to play around here. I've kind of swapped from map to map, and I just kind of jumping ahead in my notes, like I wouldn't say that there's necessarily one specific best map for this strategy. I've tried a lot of different maps. I've found that I really like some of them, and then there were some that I thought would be really good, like, you know, Dunes, for example, that I actually was kind of disappointed by. Atoll, another one that I really like the map layout. I figured that would be a great one, but Citadel, which is the one that comes from Atoll, is about half as valuable as Ziggurat, so actually kind of disappointing in the end. Now, of course, there's more. There's always more. It's Path of Exile, and if we want to kind of take a look here, all of the bosses from the Tier 17 maps can drop Uber Boss fragments. There are 7 Uber bosses, so 7 different types of fragments, but all of the bosses are weighted in specific ways. Basically, the boss of Ziggurat has a higher chance to drop Uber Maven, Uber Eater of Worlds, and Uber Cortex fragments. So if we look here in the currency tab for some reason of PoE Ninja to look at the Uber Boss fragments, don't know why it's not in the fragment tab, but whatever, we can see there is a massive disparity in prices between the fragments from the different Uber bosses. Like Uber Cortex, very hard, very unprofitable. It's like literally not even 1/10 as valuable as Uber Maven, which is worth basically 2 divines or so. So Uber Maven fragments are far and away the most valuable, then Uber Eater, and then everything else really, really falls off a cliff. So the bosses that drop Uber Maven fragments, which if we just go to the reality fragment page of the wiki, we can see the bosses that are most likely to drop: Abomination boss and Ziggurat boss. So those are the 2, what a shock. Those are the 2 most valuable bosses to farm. Sanctuary is also pretty valuable because that can drop the divination card Sucker of the Sinless, which gives Bottled Faith. And I think the boss has also got some like fairly valuable drops. But either way, the 3 most valuable maps are Ziggurat, Abomination, and Sanctuary. And so farming the blocks of maps that will shoot out those Tier 17 maps specifically is the most valuable setup here. So like, as always with Path of Exile, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of like little optimizations to make, but basically it just boils down to you want to be doing either like maps that fall into one of these three columns: Abomination, Sanctuary, and Ziggurat. And you know, you can just look that up, tier 17 map on the PoE wiki, whenever you want to look at that table, just for sort of a refresher. Okay, so my philosophy for this strategy, I wanted to do something that was kind of different from all of the strategies I'd been doing recently, and I kind of had a couple of like things that I really wanted to emphasize with this. One, I wanted it to be cheap, like actually cheap. I know there'd been some complaints about some recent strategies that I'd come up with where like most of the things that you're spending on the strategy are cheap, but then there's one scarab that like maybe the price goes up and now it's half a divine or something. So I wanted to eliminate all of that and keep everything, all the scarabs, like maximum of 10 chaos, super cheap. Ultimately, everybody wants a strategy that costs absolutely nothing, is infinitely profitable, and is also easy. And like those are incompatible with each other. But something that's cheap and still somewhat profitable and also fun to do, that's good. So on that note, cheap, fast, no annoying league mechanics, and fun. And so what I've come up with is an Atlas passive tree here that is centered around back to basics. So we're not getting any extra content at all, and we're not getting any influences. So we're not getting any sort of annoying, we're not having to deal with like Abyss or Harbinger or anything to throw a ton of maps at us. That way we are keeping it super simple. What we are doing is we're just juicing as much mod effect on our maps as we possibly can. I would compare back to basics to Eater of Worlds shrines. You could say the same for like Exarch shrines, that's fine too. But the main thing here is when you do Eater or Exarch shrines, you'll run through the map, you'll clear out guys, you will have shrines pop up, you'll click them, you'll get some bonuses. Maybe there'll be like map duplication. That's a great one if you're trying to farm maps. Quantity and rarity, that's good. That'll increase the number of maps you get because it's quantity and rarity on the map. Ultimately, like a lot of good bonuses that will increase the amount of stuff that you get, right? But the problem is that in farming up those altars, you do actually have to kill guys, which means that by the time you've gotten all those altar bonuses rolling, a lot of the monsters that you're looking to kill to get those rewards from are already dead. A thing that Back to Basics does is this bonus is applied from the very start of the map. It is a 0 to 80% more explicit modifier effect roll, so sometimes you'll zone in and it will have done nothing. It'll be 0% more or 1% more, but then there have been times where I've zoned into a map and I have over 320% increased item quantity, like 115% pack size, like truly some incredibly increased and powerful map mods. Now, in addition to this, we're also taking everything we possibly can to increase map mod effect. We're taking every single one of the small passives in the top hat and the two arms now. We're taking Chiseled Perfection. We're taking mounting modifiers, just everything that can juice map mod effect. And then we're also taking all of the increased item quantity and item rarity here in this area here as well. We are wasting these 3 points on Harbinger chance, but that's fine. It's worth it to get that extra bit of item quantity and rarity because all of this extra quantity and rarity and pack size that we're getting on the maps gives us tons and tons of guys to kill. It gives us just lots of random drops. Like you can do this kind of to jump ahead in my notes here. You can do this instead of farming maps. You could farm like divination cards on a map like Jungle Valley. I've done that and gotten over 5 fortunate cards in a single map. And I'm spending like maybe 5-6 chaos a map to do that strategy. I've just gotten a lot of random crap too. I've gotten Voidborn Reliquary keys that all gave me like 1 chaos uniques. I've gotten a lot of that kind of thing, just a lot of random stuff. Einar's Memory of Harvest Beasts, Einar's Memory of the Sacred Grove, lots of different memories and just kind of random stuff. And that really is, I think, a big part of this strategy here is it's a lot of variance, but it's kind of low cost, so that's okay. It also means that map rolling is incredibly important. You do want your maps to be well rolled. You want to make sure that you don't have any build disabling modifiers on them. That's vitally important. And then because the map mod effect is going to be juiced potentially to the moon, potentially just like doubled or tripled from what it says, a lot of map modifiers that you might think, oh, that's not really a big deal, less cooldown recovery, right? 40% less cooldown recovery. If that's tripled, that's now 120% less cooldown recovery. So something that you might not, you would totally take for granted, right? the cooldown of Flame Dash, the cooldown of Divine Blessing support now goes from being 1.2 seconds to infinity seconds. You get one use of your Divine Blessing support in that map, and then that's it. It will never cool down again. So there's a lot of weird stuff that occurs with having this massively increased modifier effect. Increased attack and cast speed on monsters now becomes, instead of like 30% more, it's over 100% more. When you combine that with a damage modifier, it can get pretty gnarly. But there are no Eldritch Altars applying any sort of like nasty debuffs or increased fizz as like lightning or cold. There are no Eldritch monsters spawning in and just like sniping you from the edge of the screen. So I generally think that I've actually found this to be a little bit less dangerous than some of the like worst case Eldritch Altar farming, but it can still be pretty gnarly. I think the biggest thing that's really like shook me has been some of the times where it'll be defensive mods, like more monster life, like 40% more monster life now becoming like 120% more monster life. And then also like a chaos res that instead of like 30% chaos res, it's like basically 90% chaos res. So I'm having to do like 15 times more damage to kill monsters. I think that's probably been the most crazy of the map mod combinations that I've seen, even more than any of the damage stuff. Now we're also pushing all the map mod or a map drop chance that we can. We're taking every single one of the map drop nodes, like literally all of them, even these little teeny tiny ones here. And I could actually tell a difference between running these little 5 teeny tiny map drop chance nodes and not doing that. And this is something that's been asked a bit, and it's not something that I've like personally sat down and tested 10,000 maps doing, but other people have. Even though we have all of our void stones, like we'll show this off here, right? You know, all of your void stones are in. So all of the like tier 1 Crimson Township map, these all drop baseline as a tier 16. The thing that people have, I guess, determined, tested, whatever, is that even though they say tier 1 to 15 maps have a higher chance, whatever, 15% chance to be 1 tier higher, basically the game has sort of like a pity system where when it decides it's time to drop a tier 1 map for you or a tier 5 map or whatever, instead of just not doing anything because you're only capable of dropping tier 16s due to the void stones, it will kind of accumulate those like percentages of a lower tier map. And then once it's added up enough of those, it will throw a tier 16 map at you. So by having all of these little bonuses to the tier of maps that drop, that increases the amount of tier 16 maps that you get by increasing the amount of value that's being added into that pity system. Now, in addition to this, I am taking all of the sort of important necropolis nodes. I am taking Eternal Torment. There was a while where the tormented spirit that could spawn from collecting corpses in maps would actually work, even though Back to Basics disables everything. It disables, Jun, Nico, Sacred Grove, Torment, Shrines, Smuggler's Caches, Delirium, etc. Like, it disables everything that exists in the game. It's disabled by Back to Basics. The only thing that you have to worry about is just rolling the map mods. And we chisel, we alch and scour if we need to get to good map mods, and then we vol and hope that it doesn't brick the map and hope it rolls up to 8 mods. That's ideal. But for a little while, Eternal Torment was capable of throwing out Tormented Spirits. That was removed, but Tormented Spirits still exists. So to kind of jump a little bit ahead here, I am still taking Unrelenting Torment because for whatever reason, that still causes the map bosses having a 10% chance to be surrounded by Tormented Spirits. That still happens. So I like to take Speaker of the Dead and Unrelenting Torment together just to give myself a chance to get a bunch of Tormented Spirits when I'm fighting a map boss, or even if not, that's also fine. The thing, though, with Tormented Spirits is that the Lantern of Arimor still has a lot of Tormented Spirit bonuses in it that override Back to Basics. So one will be all the bosses or all the monsters in a pack type will be like possessed or touched by Tormented Spirits. That still works. So taking all of the small passives that impact that, the 3 small passives here in this Seance wheel, and then the actual like Unrelenting Torment notable, that will increase the amount of stuff that those monsters drop. Also, there is a Lantern of Arimor bonus that will make it so that when you kill hacks, they will sometimes shoot out tormented spirits. Those tormented spirits are regular tormented spirits. They can run around and hit people, or if you take Speaker of the Dead, you can catch them, and then you can touch monsters and juice them up that way for this increased item quantity. Now, Seance won't work. I did take Seance. I played around with it for like, I don't know, 50 or 100 maps or something, and I never saw any possessed monsters other than ones that were being affected by the Lantern of Arimor. I've come down the right side here because I kind of want the haunted modifier effect to be stronger. I want more corpses. I'm also taking corpses over here. You don't have to do that. I've just also been farming corpses, and I have found that valuable. I have found several valuable corpses in the span of running all of these maps and farming all of these tier 17 and tier 16 maps. That's kind of something that I've glossed over thus far, but I have also farmed a ton of tier 16 maps in this span of time. And, you know, your mileage will vary. Sometimes the maps will be relatively unrewarding. I've had plenty of maps where I go in, I get like one map and basically like almost no currency. You know, it wasn't a very good one. And then I've had maps where I go in and I'll come out with like a lot of currency and 26, 27 maps in a single map. So, you know, definitely some variance, but because the costs are cheap, we can accept that. We can live with that. One thing I want to finish up on here, I guess two things I want to finish up on here in talking about just the Atlas passive tree. All the Scarab nodes, I'm taking basically all of them. I'm not taking any of the ones that skew affinity because divination scarabs are super valuable, and I have actually gotten several valuable divination scarabs. And by skewing your scarab affinity in any direction, you reduce the amount of divination scarabs that you can get. So I'm just doing everything I can to juice the amount of them that I get. I'm taking all of the small passives that increase scarabs by a little bit more than these small travel nodes. And I'm taking significant troves. I've killed some unique monsters. Sometimes you'll have Lantern of Arimor bonuses that throw a bunch of Rogue Exiles in, or sometimes Rogue Exiles will just spawn randomly, or you'll use a All Flame Ember to get more Rogue Exiles. So I do kill enough unique monsters that I think that this kind of is worth it. It's not like I've got a lot of great options to spin points anyways. You know, I'm not like taking Harbingers or anything. There's not really anything else to take other than coming over here and getting this. So might as well. And finally, singular focus is the one final thing I wanted to actually like emphasize in the Atlas passive tree. So it has some positives and negatives. The positive is if you're trying to farm tier 16 maps to like actually sell tier 16 maps, which good tier 16 maps, Dunes, Jungle Valley, that sort of thing, you can sell 30 of them to a divine. That's pretty easy to do. I've sold quite a lot of divines worth of Dunes and Jungle Valley uncorrupted in the last few days. Now, if you wanted to run this Scarab and corrupt them with 8 modifiers, you can sell those for quite a bit more, but that is maybe a little bit more work. Some people will want you to do a regex and sell them specific ones, and I cannot be bothered to do that. You can also just farm up 8 mod corrupted maps for yourself to then do this farming strategy. Ultimately, I think the only real issue with doing that is by using this Scarab, you're then sacrificing one of your Scarab spots that you would use for juicing the maps in other ways. So singular focus is really good for like specifically narrowing down a type of tier 16 map. It also doesn't prevent you from getting tier 17 maps, which is good. The problem with it is you do get fewer maps. You do get fewer total tier 16 maps. And so there's kind of an uncertainty. I don't know. I'm sure someone is testing or has tested, and maybe there's some results on this, but I just simply don't know. Does the game decide before it throws the map on the ground, before it would convert something that's not one of your favored maps into currency instead? Does it decide this is a tier 17 map and it throws it out? Or by getting fewer total maps from using singular focus, do you reduce the number of tier 17 maps that you get in total? And the answer is, I'm not sure. I have played around with it a bit, but I haven't done thousands of maps worth of testing to really get like a definitive answer. I think you would probably need 10,000 maps with this on and 10,000 maps with this off to know with like pretty good certainty as to whether this does or doesn't affect the actual number of tier 17 map drops that you get. I played with it on and off for a while in the last couple of days, and I felt like I could tell a difference. I felt like I did get a little bit more tier 17 maps with it off, but you know, that could just be a little bit of RNG. And I definitely got less like useful maps like Dunes and Jungle Valley that I would want to sell when I wasn't running singular focus. So I ultimately have gone back to using singular focus. I like it. I like being able to target farm maps. So that has been the approach I've taken. All right, so just to re-emphasize some important things in the setup, map rolling is super important. Like, I can't really stress that enough. You have to chisel and alch your maps. You really want to make sure that your maps have good mods on them. You ultimately, right, the cost of this setup is not very high, so you can run maps that you chisel, alch, and val, and then like nothing happens and they're just at 4 mods. You can do that, and that's okay. I mean, I've been doing that, but you do want to make sure that your map mods, like, the better they are, the more rewarding that this will be. Now, as for Scarabs, we have several options here, and most notably, even though Back to Basics turns off extra content, it doesn't turn off Scarabs. So there are a lot of things we can use to, like, still juice the maps. I think the most important one is this Scarab of Hunted Traders, which just adds a ton of guys into your maps to kill, and they will drop stuff, you know, currency, maps, Scarabs. They drop regular stuff. They fight with the other NPCs that are in the maps, and it's just a lot of guys for a single Scarab that costs like 1.5 chaos each. Now, you have a couple of other white Scarab options as well. You can run Scarabs of Monstrous Lineage. I think that makes the most sense with us juicing pack size in the way that we are, by increasing the magic pack size by another 40%. Really makes the magic packs huge, makes them drop a lot more. You can also do Mysterious Scarabs, get a bunch of barrels in there. Barrels are kind of random. Sometimes they explode, sometimes they drop stuff, sometimes they have bugs in them, like, I don't know. I don't love barrels for this strategy. I did play around with them for a while, and I never really felt like I really got anything all that valuable out of them. I know that they're kind of well liked in tier 17 maps, but I haven't really found them to be all that great in tier 16. And then Scarab of Adversaries is another one that I played around with. This adds 4 rare packs, but the rares in the packs are mirrored, so there are 2 of them. So it adds 8 rares, but 4 packs, and you can run 2 of these Scarabs. Now, all of these will add a lot of guys. I think if you were to run, like, basically a setup like this, where you do Hunted Traders, Monstrous Lineage, and then 2 Scarab of Adversaries, that'll add a lot of guys. That'll really fill the map with dudes. But then it's not really doing anything to, like, increase the drop value of them. You're basically just playing with a bunch of regular random dudes. So the approach that I've been going with has actually been this: Hunted Traders to add a bunch of guys. That's the most effective at adding a bunch of guys. And then 2 Scarabs of Duplication, and this is by far the most expensive thing in the strategy. They've cost anywhere from like 5 to 10 chaos. I think I paid about 7 chaos or so. I think I can buy like 24 of them or so for a divine. So don't know what that is off the top of the dome, but I think divines are around 150 again. So 24 divided by 150, that's 6-7 chaos each. So you can run 2, and I have been. That gives you a 60% chance to duplicate all of your maps. Now, those duplicated maps can't roll into tier 17s. Like, whenever a map duplicates, it's always 2 of the same map. You're not getting an extra chance at getting a tier 17, but when you get tier 17s, you have a 60% chance to get 2, so better than 50%. You're getting more than doubled on all of your tier 17 maps by running duplication Scarabs, so I like them. I think they're worth running. And then I've just been throwing in a regular cartography Scarab as the 4th Scarab option. I mean, you could play with some other things. You could play with Monstrous Lineage to just get more guys instead of that. But I think just throwing in the regular Carto Scarab to get just more maps, increase your number of maps on top of everything else, that has a multiplicative effect with the duplication Scarabs. Hypothetically, you could run a setup that looks more like this. Just all cartography Scarabs and maximize your value in that way. But I actually think that by having the Hunted Traders, by having more guys to kill, I think you actually get more maps this way. Again, having kind of played with all of them, it's one of those things where maybe if I had the time to do like 10,000 maps of comparison between the 2 setups, we'd be able to see something. But in the span of testing, I did feel like I got more maps with the Hunted Traders, and I definitely got more stuff. You know, I got more valuable Einhar memories and like Chaos Orbs and Divines and that sort of thing. Additionally, in this strategy, and I didn't put this in my notes anywhere, I've gotten a lot of stuff out of the Lantern of Arimor bonuses. Just lots of stuff. Like, I had a map where I pulled down, I think, like 60 Orbs of Unmaking. I've had some maps where I pulled out like 40 Gem Cutters Prisms. Just a lot of stuff where the Lantern will say, like, you know, chance chance to drop this, and then you slap an all flame on it that synergizes nicely. Like if it's the strongest monster in the pack has a chance to convert all of its items into div cards or scarabs or something, then you want to throw at something at least that has a pack leader, but ideally something that is like a very small pack size, like a meat sack or a rogue exile, something like that. And if it's a chance for all the monsters in the pack to drop something like Orbs of Unmaking, then you would want to throw in an all flame that has a very large pack size, like rats or frogs. And then if it's increased quantity or increased pack size, you would want to throw in an all flame that has a chance to drop stuff like catalysts or scarabs or various currencies. So as I said before, you don't actually have to do this as a map farming strategy. That is the approach I've been taking. I think it's the most consistently profitable. But if you wanted, you could screw around with this a bit and go like, okay, instead of doing maps, I'm going to do this as a div card setup. And that is something I played around with for a while yesterday. I ran Hunted Traders and then 2 div scarabs. And then I think I found that I liked the magic pack size. So I ran this, right? Hunted Traders, just add a bunch more guys into the maps. Magic pack size, much bigger magic packs, and then just a ton more div cards. And I did this in Jungle Valley for a while, and I had pretty good results. I was, there's a lot of hit and miss. There will be plenty of maps where you'll run the whole map. You'll have spent, all of this combined is like 6 chaos or something, so it's not a huge investment. You're literally spending more on the map than I think you are on the scarabs to run it. But, I would run this and sometimes just no fortunate cards at all. But then, the next map, you might have 3, 4, 5 fortunate cards in a single map. So definitely a lot of variance. That's the whole strategy, right? Low cost, high variance. And when you get those home run shots, you push them for all they're worth, and then that's it. But ultimately, the goal is to get in and out of the maps pretty quickly. 2 minutes, 3 minutes or less. That is the goal. Cheap, fast, and inconsistent, but that works out in your favor pretty well, I think. Now, what is the best map? So I spent a lot of time searching for good layouts and high mob density, and I think when you factor in which tier 17 map you're going to get out of the deal, I think that Jungle Valley and Burial Chamber are probably the best too. I think Jungle Valley, you just want to skip the boss because she adds about 30 seconds at least, and she really isn't worth it. Burial Chamber is pretty good though. It has a ton of dudes in it, so it will really maximize the investment cost of using cartography scarabs. They cost like 8 chaos a piece at the high end. So if you're worried about that price at all, you're spending about, 20 chaos a map. So if you really want to make the most of all of those chaos that you're spending, running Burial Chamber is probably the best approach, just simply because it, I think, has probably the most monsters in it of any of the maps that are good and have good div cards available. Dunes has a good layout and okay density and a pretty easy boss, but it drops Fortress, which is the worst of the tier 17 maps, and that's kind of unfortunate. All 3 of those maps, Jungle Valley, Burial Chamber, and Dunes, have a good divination card. I would say Burial Chamber has a terrible boss as well. I would probably skip her as well as the Jungle Valley boss. I think they're both worth skipping. Toxic Sewer is also a good map. It has a lot of dudes. It's very dense. It's very easy to clear. It's really good for Toxic Rain or any sort of build that thrives on closely stacked enemies and really tight hallways. The only real problem with Toxic Sewer is that it has terrible div cards, but it has the best tier 17 map drop, so I like that map as well. Another strategy I played around with was using the Horned Scarab of Nemesis along with the Scarab of Adversaries. So Hunted Traders, just always to stack more guys in, then 2 adversaries to add in 8 more rares, and then a Horned Scarab of Nemesis to add 2 mods onto all of the rares in the map. And I tried playing around with this just to see, could I get any more value out of all of the rares? And I did this for a little while, maybe an hour or so. I didn't really find that I got anything out of it. I think it's something you could play around with. Maybe it would be kind of a big game hunting strategy, but it didn't really amount to much for me. All right, so now let's talk about selling maps. I think that's maybe the most valuable thing. How do you sell the maps? So there are a couple of ways. You can bulk sell on community discords like TFT or whatever. I think that's probably the fastest, most effective way. So if you're wanting to sell maps without any interacting with any sort of third-party platforms, a really good way to bulk list them, to bulk price them, is to go into the map tab, right click on the map that you're trying to sell, set an exact price on all items, and then, if you wanted to sell all the maps as 5 chaos, you could just hit 5, right? But then you're going to get hit up by people wanting to buy 1 or 2 or 4. Like, you don't want to deal with that. So the way you want to price this out is you want to type out the number of maps you want to sell at a time. Maybe it's 10, and then whatever that price you want per map multiplied by that other number. So I want to sell all these maps for 5 chaos each, but I want to sell them in sets of 10 at a time. I would say 50 divided by 10, and now people can buy them from me for 50 chaos for 10. So 5 at a time, or 5 a piece, but 10 at a time. You can also, if you want to just kind of keep things more simple, sell them for divine orbs. You could say, okay, 1 divine orb for how many maps? Let's say it's 30. That is the price I've been selling these at. So 1 divided by 30 divine, and then people will message you saying, I want to buy 30 jungle valleys for 1 divine. So that really simplifies the process of selling maps in bulk, makes it a lot easier than trying to sell them, 1 at a time for 5 chaos each. Okay, let's just kind of hit some of the final notes here. Time investment wise, how fast is this? Oh, it's fast. Fast maps is really important. It's good. It means more opportunities to flip through the league mechanic, the Lantern of Arimor, and potentially get something big from it. It also means more corpses, and I haven't really shown this off, but oh, I got them corpses. A lot of corpses, and I've been selling corpses too. I got corpses galore. In terms of whether it pulls you away from regular mapping, not at all. Totally part of the normal regular mapping cycle, very effective. In terms of the difficulty, it is tier 16 maps that are juiced to an incredible degree with map mod effect, but then there isn't any sort of league mechanic stuff or Eater or Exarch interacting with it. So I would say that the difficulty is high, but it's more like weird. It's more that the map mods that you never really realized how dangerous they can be when they're just tripled can suddenly really surprise you. But on the whole, I would say this is actually kind of an easier strategy than a lot of more traditional juiced tier 16 mapping. We're not dealing with delirium here, right? We're not dealing with even just very juicy Harbinger packs. Several Harbinger packs on top of each other can actually be pretty gnarly. I think this is a somewhat difficult strategy, but once you kind of get the hang of dealing with the map mods, it's really not that bad. And again, the worst case scenario, let's say you have a map that just completely bricks you out. You may have only spent 10 or 20 chaos on it, so it's really not that huge of an investment to just get completely run out of a map. As for scaling with quantity and rarity and all that kind of thing, absolutely, it really does. It will throw just kind of a bunch of random crap at you, and that could be pretty fun. You can also use this setup for other purposes. As I mentioned, the divination card Scarab setup, I think, works really well. I farmed a lot of fortunate cards doing that strategy. I think, again, the Nemesis strategy with a lot of the, where is it here? The Scarab of adversaries. I think forcing rares to have a bunch of extra modifiers. I think there's a lot of potential for playing around with this strategy and just doing a lot of different stuff and trying to use this as kind of a very alternate juicing method from a lot of the traditional ones where you would use a bunch of quant and rarity altars from the Eater of Worlds, and you would use a bunch of delirium layers, that sort of thing. Instead, you are using this to just force map mod effect to be insanely strong. I mean, hypothetically speaking, if you really wanted to get degenerate with it, you could use a low-cost version of this setup. Go into the map. If you don't get any good Lantern of Arimor mods and you zone in and the map mod effect seems like it's really low, just count that as a bad map and just recycle. Just basically fish for either good Lantern mods or good map mod effect rolls. And that is definitely something you could potentially do. I'm not doing that. I think that's a little bit too degenerate for my taste, but I do think that is an option that you could pursue. I really have enjoyed this strategy a lot. I think of all the strategies that I've done in the last couple of weeks, I think this has probably been the one that is the most versatile, the most modular. You can turn it into all kinds of different things. I also think it's been the most fun, and I wouldn't say it's the most consistent, but I definitely think it is probably one of the more profitable ones just because the cost is so low and the potential profits are so high. All right, that is it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have fun farming tier 16 maps with just 300% map mod effect. Bye.